Fala pessoal, começando o TechShortz número 7, o primeiro de 2025. Vamos refletir um pouquinho? É claro que o mundo da tecnologia é ávido por novas ideias, por criar algo novo ou melhorar o que já existe, a famosa inovação. E isso não é de agora não, vem desde a criação da roda até chegar nos dias de hoje, com a inteligência artificial, por exemplo. Sempre houve uma expectativa grande de que o avanço da tecnologia pudesse resolver problemas até então sem solução ou dar mais celeridade a soluções já existentes. Mas será que toda inovação que nós oferecemos para as pessoas é realmente necessário para os problemas do dia a dia? Temos nos atentado enquanto provedores de soluções para o que de fato as pessoas têm buscado? Estaríamos nós vendendo tanques de guerra para matar baratas? Profundo. Para refletirmos um pouco mais sobre esse tema, fizemos uma conexão direta com San Diego, na Califórnia, para bater um papo com o vice-presidente de data center da Nokia, Michael Bushong. My friend, Mike Bushong, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. That's an amazing way to start this year, right? Speaking about innovation, technology, and in real life. And how are you doing? Happy New Year and welcome to TechShortz.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. It's been a relatively quiet close to the year, so I'm excited to kind of get into things. Obviously, it should be a big year from a technology perspective, so hopefully the conversation today will be great.
Great. Someone told me Brazil is your second favorite country in the world, and you know what? I believe it is.
It could be it might even be my favorite country in the world. I had a great time there. I think the little the cheesy bread that you guys serve during every break.
Yes. It's amazing. Don't be afraid. We have just Brazilians watching us. Okay. Mike, I'd like to start talking about innovation. All right. And we've been used to believing that innovation will solve all of our problems, right? But lately, we see that people just looking for services that simply work or are easy to use and manage or affordable as well, right? Do you see this as a warning for our industry?
I think warning is probably a good way to look at it. If I look at what people actually want, at least from an infrastructure perspective, they need things that work. And the reason I say that is that when you spend too much time talking about what's coming next, and you don't spend enough time working on what's there today, what you end up creating is this mismatch in expectations. You see, there's a lot of hype around any new technology wave. These days, obviously, AI, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. But there's with all the hype that's there, the real basic question that people have is this going to work in my environment? And the challenge you have when you forget the basics, when you don't just make products and services that work, is you start to create skepticism, this disbelief in the using foundation, the people who actually have to implement these things. And that disbelief, it actually slows things down. Because if I don't fundamentally believe that you can do what I need you to do today, I'm not going to trust you to make the changes for me tomorrow. And when I don't trust, then I'll move slowly, or I will move hesitantly, or I will not take the steps I need to take. So I think, I think it is a good warning. I think it's a big red flag that the state of the industry isn't where it needs to be. And I think that anybody who has like a heavy innovation agenda, if you're not paying attention to the on the ground realities, I think you set yourself up for failure because you're going to set expectations that ultimately will not come true.
And how can we balance it? So these technological expectations with what people really need?
I think you have to think through probably two parts, right? One is, where do you want to be, right? That's the innovation, that's the hype. But then you have to also think through what's the migration to get there. And in order to understand a migration, you have to know where people are today and then ultimately where they want to be. And then that migration, what it does is it sets the conditions under which you want to deliver innovation. So what does that mean? If I fundamentally want to deliver a new innovation, I have to understand, where people are starting, and I have to start my innovation there. I cannot require a full re-architecture or a step function change in behavior. And let me give you just like a really concrete example. Let's take automation, right? We've been talking about automation from a networking perspective anyway for 2 decades. Now, if the goal of automation is to give people more freedom, programmatic access, API-driven behaviors, if that's really what we want to try to do, then we have to acknowledge where people are today, which is still mostly manual operations. Now, a good example, right? Inside most networks today, most companies don't even know their own workflows. And so if I come in and say that I'm going to give you this, complete automation suite, but the customers don't even know their own workflows, how can you possibly expect them to succeed? It's not a technology barrier in this case. Like in that case, it's going to be, people and process and integrations and surrounding tooling. And so if I don't solve those problems, then my really, great automation solution will have zero impact.
Yes, we can't separate people of the solution, right?
Correct. And I think this is, so when I think about innovation, you have to meet people, effectively where they are, and you have to give them a plausible path forward. And going back to the discussion of hype, when the separation between where people are and where the hype is, when that gap or that separation is too big, then the only thing that people can conclude is that they cannot make the leap. And if you fundamentally try to drive change in an environment where the people do not trust you, that they're skeptical of the belief or of the future, if that's the case, then you're not going to find willing participants. And if you don't have willing participants, the change will fail.
Yes. Last week, I was thinking, I don't know if it happens to you, but people get uncomfortable when we say, well, maybe AI and a lot of innovation is not the answer for our problems and questions, because we have good and efficient solutions without AI, for example, just with a good code, a good automation, right? But people get angry when they hear that. And do you notice this behavior in people when we talk about AI in this context?
Yeah, I frequently will tell people, I'll reassure them. I believe that AI is real. I believe that AI will have an impact.
Yes, yes.
I just think it's not going to solve every single problem. I think we have to be a little bit aware of what AI can do and what it cannot do. And then I also think we have to be a little bit aware of the right tool for the right job. And so again, I'll give you an easy example. When you're troubleshooting, are you expecting AI to do, multivariable, troubleshoot where you're trying to figure out kind of a very complex problem?
Mhm.
Maybe, but most troubleshooting process is really more rules based, right? You look at something and say, if I see this symptom, I take this action. That's not really like AI. That's more of an event engine where I say, in these circumstances, do this thing, and then take that and then say, based on the results of that thing, do this other thing. Those are two different approaches, right? One of them is probabilistic. The other one is deterministic. And using AI for deterministic stuff, like, is that really AI? I probably would say no. And then just to your point, right? I would then apologize and say, I'm not trying to say that AI is not useful. I'm just trying to say that there's a difference in methods.
Yes.
But what I think we have to do is say, like, look, all of these things are going to coexist.
Yeah,
And
perfect.
so, yeah, and then the question is, how do you integrate them and how do you use the right tool in the right situation? To me, that's more practical. And then going back to the previous discussion, when you're more practical, then to the person who's actually implementing it, it feels more real because it's like, oh, I see that you're going to use some things that I do today that are quite effective, and you're going to complement those with some capabilities from AI, which is going to make it more effective. To me, that's a migration story. That's not just AI replacing everything.
Yeah. And in the middle of this ocean, we have the market. But I think the market is the ocean in the turf. But the market usually inspects technology companies to create miracle solutions with AI and innovation, right? But sometimes it's difficult. How can companies align these expectations with reality without damaging the reputation of the industry as one of innovative solutions?
So AI it's a good cautionary tale. There's companies that have gone out and they've talked about the role they play in AI, and then their stock, increased by huge percentages. And then over time, when the AI revenue didn't materialize, their stock was punished. And so to me, that's a good example where what happens is the market sets expectations. We should be very clear on what those expectations are. The market expects solutions that will be deployed and will lead to like a fundamental monetization of those solutions. You have to build a profitable business out of it. And if you can't demonstrate, sustained profits, and it's not just sustained revenue, it's sustained profits, and
Profits.
those are different.
Yes, yes.
Then the market will punish you. And the reason I make that distinction, then you have to answer the question: how do I take this use case, this whatever this thing is? How do I take that and how do I predictably deliver profit? It goes back to where we started, which is if you're not deployable in a real world scenario, if you only solve part of the problem, or
Yes.
if your people cannot adopt it, if they cannot make the transition within their organization, then you're never going to convert your proof of concept to a scaled deployment. And if you don't do that, then the revenue will not show up. I think what you've got to do, if you really want to build a durable business, you have to go and build for concrete use cases that solve real world problems, what customers think are problems, not what vendors think are problems. And you've got to do that in a way that is approachable by the staff, and then frankly fits within their existing, priorities, budgets, tooling, whatever. I think you got to start very small and practical and then build that bridge. The companies that do not do that well, when they set expectations too far ahead, what they'll do is they'll lose trust in this ocean, this market that you're talking about. And when you lose trust there, it takes years to regain that. And here's the problem. If the market doesn't trust you, they'll never buy you.
Yes. Yes, yes, of course. Yeah, we have to trust on our provider, right? And we are talking about innovation, AI, so a lot of things. And in this context, we have the theory and practice. And I've heard you talk about the difference between theory and practice in a Nick event at São Paulo last year, right? And I'd like to ask you, do you think you are in a kind of silent war between theory and practice in technology field?
I think it's a war. I'm not sure how silent it is. um, again, we could be like very specific in examples. So in networking, people believe that AI is going to solve a lot of problems. One of the first, if you ask most people, how would you apply AI ops to, a networking problem? Most people will correctly identify that you can detect bad or failing optics. So if you have a large fabric and you've got, thousands of interfaces, you're going to have, failures. Even if you have 6 nines, by the way, over a large enough deployment, you'll have failures every day. And so the question is, could AI ops help you detect that? The answer is yes, it could, because there's a large enough sample. You can look at, behaviors, you can look at optics degradation, and you can essentially do some thresholding to figure out which optic is likely to fail next. That's a useful thing to do. But in theory and practice, take that same conversation and then ask them, okay, what's the second use case? There's no second use case. Now, I do think AI ops is a thing, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that you can't come in and say, I can do AI, therefore things will be better. I think you have to go and say, I'm going to use AI to do this very specific task. And that's what bridges theory and practice. And I think when you approach a network engineer, you have to understand that the problem they're trying to solve is not, I don't have enough AI in my life. The problem they're trying to solve is I have a break fix thing that I'm trying to do more quickly, or I'm trying to figure out, how I can spend less time on this thing and more time on this other thing, or I'm trying to, build applications or build infrastructure for applications that is available, with some threshold, because there's penalties if it's not available. Those are different problems. The problem's not AI. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is whatever the problem is. If you cannot take your AI thing and put it in the context of that problem, it's not consumable by the end user. And so you have to bridge theory to practice. You have to make it more concrete. And then very practically, right? At some point, somebody has to get approval for a budget. And so when they do that, when they go to their bosses who don't necessarily care about all the underlying technology, what's the business case that they're going to present? It has to be, here's this thing that was impacting our company, and here is how it's impacting us now. That has to be anchored in practice. And so I don't think theory moves companies. I think theory sets direction, but I think practice is what moves companies.
Yes, you were talking about bridges. Sometimes seems like uh, there's a wall between theory and practice in the companies, right? That's a big problem, right?
Yeah, I think and I think it exists because the people building technology don't always understand what they're building it for. There's a lot of companies, and AI is not the only example, but there's a lot of companies that are building because the technology seems exciting. And so they go and they want to build around it. I was at a hackathon, I guess middle of last year, and it was unrelated to networking. It was just an AI hackathon, and they brought me in as kind of like a special guest to help, provide some
Mm-hmm.
guidance to a few dozen people that were all building startups. And one of the guys I was talking to, he was telling me what he was doing. And I said, how are you going to sell it? And his answer was basically like, look, it's, I can do something better than the current market solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, people are going to buy it. And I said, well, there's lots of examples where the market was dominated by a solution that was not the best solution. Because you have to think about, how do you sell it and how do you support it and what are the services and it's not, people don't just go after the technology. They need something bigger than that. And this guy, he looked at me and I laughed because he clearly was, his point of view was like, if he builds it,
Mm-hmm.
like AI, if AI, then profit, right? Then success. And
Mm-hmm.
when I explained to him that that's not guaranteed, that it's, if AI, then, product, then go to market, then everything else. He was so like disappointed. He looked like I had just, kicked his dog. Um, he couldn't even comprehend what I was saying. I think I just I think you gotta be able to bridge stuff. I don't think it's enough And so I don't think that this wall between the two, in some cases, I'm not even like, I don't know if it's a wall. I don't know if it's just like the bridge it's two separate bridges and they both go to different places. But like there's a fundamental disconnect when people believe because of a technology, it's going to be successful. No, it's because of a pain point. It's because of a business value. It's because of a concrete impact. That is what matters. And at the end of the day, whether you use AI or anything else actually doesn't matter.
Yes,
Um,
of course. Hey boy, there's no guarantees in technology. uh, right, and we are coming to the end of our talk, but I have one last topic. I believe that big companies like, for example, Nokia, Google, Microsoft, others, not only need to create technological solutions, but also to develop great leaders in managers and IT professionals, right? And what advice would you give to the next generations of IT professionals and managers about finding the balance between creating impactful solutions through innovation and solving real life problems quickly, for example?
I guess a couple of things. One, I think we need to stop thinking about leadership and communication as soft skills. Sometimes we talk about it as it's a soft thing. It's not. Leadership is a hard skill. It's learned just like learning a new programming language. You have to write your hello world programs. You have to practice and you improve. Leadership, we all think that leadership is common sense, that it's somehow easy. But if leadership was so easy, why do we all have more examples of bad leaders than good leaders in our personal careers? So I think leaders in this space need to start thinking about leadership like it's a hard skill. You got to practice it. You have to train. You have to deliberately do it over and over again. It requires repetition. It requires thoughtful application. Now, the reason I say that, if we want to drive innovation, right, by definition, anyone who believes they're a thought leader, by definition, people disagree with you, right? Because if you're a leading thought, then if everyone agreed with you, then you're a consensus thinker. You're not leading, which means that if you're building out a technical career based on sort of a breakthrough vision of what's possible, then your job is going to be dominated by whether you can get other people to agree with you, whether you can get other people to follow you. And that means that it's probably more about the technology than it is, or sorry, the leadership than it is the technology. Because even if you have an objectively perfect plan, but you can't get anyone to execute it, are you going to be successful? Like, absolutely not. But if your plan is a little bit off, but you can get people to follow, you know what will happen? You'll execute that plan, and then you'll iterate the plan over time because those followers, they will test it, feedback, and they will help you be successful. What I would do if I were leading a particularly disruptive agenda in technology, I would start with leadership, and I'll be even more specific. There's two books that I would read. I would read the book Switch by Dan and Chip Heath. This book is about how do you use psychology to get people to adopt new positions. And then I would read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. That's V as in Victor, O-S-S. And these two books will give you enough anchor in psychology to allow you to effectively and consistently get people to take on new positions in technology.
Perfect. The leadership is really a hard work, a hard job for managers and IT professionals, right? And Mike, once again, I'd like to thank you for sharing your expertise in leadership as an important manager and your reflection with us, right? It was truly amazing for me. TechShortz will always be open to you and the Nokia team, and I'll be waiting for you in Rio, okay?
I will happily be back in Brazil. It looks like we'll make another couple of trips this year, so I will meet you up down. I don't know if we'll be in Rio, Sao Paulo, or other cities, but we'll definitely have to meet up, and
Yeah.
you can treat me to some of the tasty pastries from Brazil.
Yes, in Rio, we don't have bread cheese, but we have, for example, caipirinha and feijoada. It's so important for us too. But I'd like to thank you once again, Mike. See you later. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. It was a pleasure as well.
Espero que vocês tenham gostado do nosso primeiro TechShortz de 2025. E se você ainda não se inscreveu aqui no canal, a hora é agora. Quero trazer temas ainda mais interessantes para vocês curtirem, comentarem e compartilharem também. E como eu sempre digo, é um prazer passar um tempo aqui com vocês. Então, um grande abraço e valeu!